Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the No Easy Way Out podcast. My name is Tony, and we are coming to you as always from the Armory in beautiful downtown Owasso, home to our company AZ Business Solutions, where we help grow your brand from A to Z. So today's guest is a very, very influential woman in our community here in Owasso. She is the recent recipient of the 2020 Athena Award. We're going to talk all about that today, as well as the president of the Shiawassee Family YMCA. And many, many other things. But our guest today is Laura Archer. Laura, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Tony. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been trying to do this for a little while. Finally, we're able to get our schedules together and make this happen. So I'm excited about it. Thank you for being here. So we met, I think the first time we met was through the YMCA. I also kind of volunteer as the athletic director at my kids' school. So we were trying to rent gymnasiums and trying to work through that. So that was kind of our first interaction. And then over the course of the last few years, like we both are kind of movers and shakers in our community. So we've had a lot of opportunity to collaborate and be involved in the same things and work on things. So It's always been fun. And we both got an award this year at the chamber thing. So that was pretty cool too. We got to get on stage. I did a speech and I went like 4 or 5 minutes and I thought it was way too long. And then Laura got up and made my speech look so bad. Like she's such a good speaker. So
well, I used to teach speech. You know, so.
Well, it was great. It was a great speech. It was memorable.
Thanks.
So good job there. So well, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and some of the things you're involved with in our community here?
Sure. On a personal note, I married my soulmate in 2019. We'd known each other for over 20 years and both found ourselves single, and he came and joined the Y, and the rest is history. So we have 3 daughters, an amazing son-in-law, and 2 grandsons who now are our world. I've been at the YMCA for about 4 years, and some of the connections I've had from being in the county for as long as I have, I've maintained. So I'm still involved with the American Red Cross as a council member here. I'm also a volunteer with the Angel program through Michigan State Police and the Owasso Public Safety. I'm involved here as the chamber, as you know, as a board member and a volunteer, and I absolutely love it. It's been some great connections for me at the YMCA.
Yeah.
I also participate in the nonprofit capacity building program that the Cook Family Foundation supports and coordinates, and that's been especially helpful the last 18, 20 months. So recently we've gotten involved with feeding people through the Y, so that's really a new part of my community focus. Through mobile food pantries, we have little food pantries, which are like lending libraries, but they're stocked with food spread throughout the county. And then we also have backpack bags that we give away. So the whole feeding thing is new to me, but I really think it's the right time to be doing some of that work in our community.
For sure.
And my biggest thing that's in my professional world right now is really trying to help figure out the child care crisis. And so that's something I've been involved in on and off because of previous roles I've held here in the community, but really trying to help figure out how can we help families get the quality child care that they need to be able. Yeah, exactly. So that's really what I'm involved with currently.
Yeah, my mom she ran an in-home daycare for almost 40 years. She just retired.
Wow.
She just retired in 2020. And so I kind of grew up in the daycare world. And so I had the challenge of that, and I know parents sharing their stories of, needing to do this because they came from a multi-income family and trying to find the ways to pay for it and even getting creative with how they did it and what hours they dropped them off. It's a real need. So I'm glad to hear that you're working on that. So we mentioned this in the intro, you recently won the Athena Award through the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber actually employed us to make a video as they took the reward, made the announcements to the award recipients at their place of business. They wanted to kind of do it like Ed McMahon style. So for those of us who are our age, probably know who Ed McMahon is.
Right.
Like the big prize, they would show up with the balloons. And for the first time ever in my life that I've known you, you were a little speechless. We're going to show a little clip of that right now.
The Athena Award is an international award presented to an exceptional individual who has achieved excellence in his or her business or profession, has served the community in a meaningful way, and has assisted women in reaching their full potential. The 2021 Athena Award recipient is Laura Archer of Owasso. Laura has spent many years giving her time and talent to several causes in Shiawassee County. She is currently the CEO of the YMCA, and her award nominator said, Laura works tirelessly for the good of Shiawassee County, and she fully embodies the spirit of Athena. She is a role model and a successful woman in leadership, and willing and shares her time and expertise to assist any women to become successful in our community. So congratulations to Laura.
I was raised to give back, and so I know my mom and dad, I can see him on the screen. I hope I embody that in what I do and to make an impact in this community with the great village that we built. I mean, it's taken decades, but I never do anything alone, and that's what makes it so worthwhile. And everything that we endeavor to do here at the Y, I mean, it's all about community, but my heart has always been about the community. So this means so much. Thank you.
Tell us, like, when you got that, what you were thinking, what happened, what was going through your mind, and why you were so speechless.
Well, I have to say that the chamber really pulled it off, number one, because I had no idea there were people in our building. And a lot of people come in, through that front entrance, but they had them all come through the gym. And
yes,
so
we did.
When I walked into the judo dojo, I had no idea why I was being led back there. And I walked in and I looked around. It wasn't until I saw my parents on Zoom with my mom's twin sister from Escanaba, where I grew up, that I went, whoa, what's going on? And, I felt honored and stunned at the same time. But I've always looked up to Athena recipients. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember hearing about it when I was a young professional. And some of the ladies that I know here in our community are people that I've always wanted to emulate. I wanted to be like them. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten to know some of them personally, and they're just amazing people.
Yeah.
And, I know I've had some success in my life, but to think that I'm worthy to be in their group was what was so overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
But the work that we're able to do at the YMCA, I mean, it's just the right time for that kind of thing to happen. Yeah. So I was stunned, and I felt so honored. But the thing that I hope made clear that day was that my parents and my family modeled to me what it was like to really give back to your community.
Yeah.
And to really be that type of person. And the thing that I hope I never lose from that day is what I wanted to do more than anything was to tell my mom and dad thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you did that.
I did. I don't really remember anything I said that day, so thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, and your speech, like I said, your speech was awesome. So for our audience members who don't know what the Athena Award is, explain what the award is and what it represents.
Sure. Well, it's an award that's given out once a year to a female in the community who has a significant impact. Mm-hmm. Because I know Athena as a goddess from mythology. I don't know, right. I didn't know a lot of the details about what it meant to be an Athenian, but it's about service and it's about mentoring. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I've always loved in any role that I've had is being able to help other women live up to the potential that they have as professionals. And so that's something that really resonates with me as an Athenian, mm-hmm. and something I hope I can do something with.
Yeah.
And so Athenians are really the women who can make a difference. Mm-hmm. And so again, I just don't feel like I've reached that pinnacle yet.
Well, we do, so.
Oh, well, thank you. And so I'm just super excited to be able to use that platform to really have an influence on other women.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's awesome. And it's a great club of ladies and well-deserved to you. So congratulations once again. You deserve it very, very much, in my opinion. So currently today, you're the president of the YMCA. You've been there for 4 years. And like you said, that's an organization that really touches the whole community. And
it does.
It's a nationwide organization. So there are national programs. But, the Y is actually not just a national program. It's something that is encouraged and extremely involved in the local community.
Right.
And we've been involved with the Y for a long time. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your role at the Y and some of the things that the Y has to offer to the community from a standpoint of membership and even people coming in to check it out.
Sure. So our YMCA has been here. It was incorporated in 1947 at our current site since 1955. And as you know, because you spent so much time in our building, we have a great vintage building is what I like to say. So
even carpet on the walls in some places.
Even carpet on the walls. Yes. I could, to this day, I'm still not sure why anyone would ever think carpet on the walls is a good idea. But yes, we still have the vintage carpet on the walls. So, when I was hired as CEO of the YMCA, I had not had any YMCA experience previous to that. When I grew up, we had a community center, and that's where we played basketball, and that's, the program through which I played softball in the summer. We didn't have a Y. And although the YMCA has been here and I've worked in this community, I wasn't an active member of it.
Right.
And one of the things that I find interesting is that when you talk to YMCA leaders, they say, if you've seen one Y, you've seen one Y. Because although we all have the same mission, because we're all part of YUSA, we are all unique to the communities in which we're housed. And so it's been an interesting process the last 4 years to find the navigation points between YUSA and what our community needs.
Right.
And luckily, we've been able to really become that community hub that our community needs. Yeah. And it's funny, Tony, because people will come to the Y or call the Y and say, hey, I need this. I'm wondering about this. Where can you direct me? And so that's really been helpful. But, in some ways, we're very traditional, like all other YMCAs. We've got great youth programming. This past summer out at Camp Shiawassee in Bancroft. Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
It's
awesome.
It's amazing 182 acre plot. And so we had 500 kids that went through our summer camp.
Wow. 500. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So that's one of our big youth programs. Right now we have 250 kids playing Rotary soccer out at the Hugh Parker Soccer Complex.
My niece
Another
is playing.
one. Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Did you come watch her?
I did. Last Saturday was her first game, and we were out of town, but we're going to come watch her this Saturday. So.
Bring your umbrella. It's likely to be wet.
Yeah.
But we have other types of youth programming that we do year-round, too. We have different sports depending on the season. We'll have basketball. We'll have volleyball. We're excited that we brought judo back to the YMCA. When one of the local martial arts studios here in town closed, they approached us. And years ago, long before me, the Y was known as a place where people learn judo, and Don Vondrasek was one of the key people involved in starting that and then maintaining that for decades, literally. And so we're excited that our kids' gym was redone so they could use it for judo, and it's now the Don Vondrasek dojo. A dojo is where you do judo. Yeah. So,
well, I remember when Don worked at the Y.
You do?
I got chased out of the gym by Don once.
What were you doing?
I was talking a little trash probably on the court, but he was an awesome guy. He was a disciplinarian. He was old school like that. But yeah, I remember Don very well. That's cool that you guys named that after him.
Well, he has a huge legacy at the YMCA,
yeah,
and so many people come in and they know Don, they remember Don, or they know the family, and so. We were really excited to be approached about bringing judo back. And then when we had to redo the room, it was just a natural thing to do, was to dedicate it. And I know his wife and kids and grandkids were very appreciative of that.
I'm sure, it's a great legacy for him.
Well, and that's one of the things, too, at the YMCA. So many of our programs are legacy programs because they've been around for so long. And so many times I learned to play basketball in that gym.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I did.
Right. Yeah. And so just the place where kids grow up and families come together, and you've been in that gym on a Saturday morning during basketball season. It's insane. It's crazy.
Sure
it's
is.
So loud. It's hot. But it's just that experience that so many people remember. And I'm just grateful that I get to be part of it. So
yeah, I grew up, like I said, playing ball at the Y. Like when I was in junior high and high school, like there was open gym at the Y every night. Like you go in and there was always guys playing ball. And it got pretty competitive down there, and we had some good battles. And then now as a father, I think the Y is the only place in the community that's a gym that has a family membership, which is great, for someone like me who has 6 children. And then you guys have been very gracious. We have a private school, and we aren't able to, because of lack of facilities, lack of size, to have youth sports. But you guys have allowed us to put teams in your youth basketball programs, and it's been a great extension to our school family and church family, and it's gotten us to be also be involved in those Saturday morning intense basketball things. So it's just been an awesome relationship for us, and we appreciate it. And like I said, I think that, the thing that school is, the Y is not cookie cutter. It's not,
right.
If you came from a different place and you had a Y, this one is probably different. But this Y has such a sense of home and community, and so I think I love the work that you're doing there, and I appreciate that.
Oh, well, thanks.
So what is it, you're involved in a lot of things, and you're from Escanaba originally.
Correct.
When did you move to Owasso?
Well, I moved from Escanaba to Detroit to go to the University of Detroit.
Okay, that's a big adjustment.
It was a lot of culture shock. But that was in the 80s, and when I graduated, I actually never moved back to Escanaba. So I married my college sweetheart, and he was working near Ann Arbor at the time. I was in grad school in East Lansing. So within the first couple years, I started teaching as an adjunct professor at Baker College here in Owasso. And so we bought a home in Perry, and I have been in this county ever since. So I think I moved here in 1994.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So
okay. So you've mentioned that you love the community, and so
I do.
What is it about the community that you love that not just makes you love living here, but not makes you be, probably overcommitted in a lot of areas in your life, and just so involved with what's going on here? And what is it about this place that makes you want to be involved at that level?
Well, I think Owasso has a larger than average number of people who are invested in the community, number one.
Yeah.
And it's not just community leaders like you and me. I think there are a tremendous number of business owners, and I think there's a lot of just our general population that are happy to be in Owasso and want Owasso to thrive.
For sure.
So that's part of it. But I also, my experience, I was at Baker for 22 years, and I kind of grew up there as a professional.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was always amazed by is that if you wanted to partner with somebody in the community, there was always somebody who you could find who would be willing to partner or collaborate. And that hasn't changed, especially since I've been at the Y. I've seen it even more so. We're able to connect with different types of organizations, sometimes nonprofits, sometimes businesses, sometimes just individuals. And so that collaborative nature, the idea that we're stronger together and that we can make a difference in our community, I think is one of the things I love the most. And you walk around at farmers market, or you go into one of your favorite restaurants, you see people that was the environment I grew up in the UP. Some people laugh and say, oh, the UP behind the times, but for me, the beaver cleaver style of the community I grew up in, especially the neighborhood I grew up in, was something that I looked for as an adult.
For sure. Yeah.
So
absolutely. I think it's a wholesome time that we all kind of miss, and
correct.
There was an innocence to it that was great. And even, my kids will even see some of those older TV shows and like, that seems like it would have been a funner time to be raised in. So even for them to kind of recognize that, things are so complicated today sometimes, but that is very true. Owasso is that place where, you can make a big impact in your community if you make the effort. And I just recently had a friend who grew up here, and he lives in Connecticut now, and he came back to visit, and he was just so impressed by the growth that he sees in our downtown and the growth in our community and the things that are happening and all the little cultural things that have been added. And Josh Adams was a big part of that.
Yes, I agree.
We actually had him on the podcast. I think he was like episode 6 or something, but we did an episode called Co-opetition. That was his big word, co-opetition. And that's something that's very unique to this area, because when I was in New York working, like, people did not want to work with you. They didn't want to, they didn't want to collaborate. They wanted to do their own thing, and they viewed you as their competition, and so they didn't want to give you an edge. And here it's neat to see businesses, even in similar industries, working together
Correct.
For a common goal. And, they are competitors, but they're also cooperating together. And it's just really, really cool and unique. So, yeah, I love that.
I agree.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey. You kind of have alluded to a couple of things. You were born and raised in the UP, up in Escanaba, almost to the bottom of the UP there.
Right.
And then you moved all the way to Detroit,
right?
Which is a huge, like you said, a huge culture shift. So what did you go to school for? You went to Detroit Mercy or?
It was University of Detroit
University
at the
of
time.
Detroit,
I was actually the last graduating class before they merged. So that was going on as I was finishing my bachelor's degree. So I went to college to be a criminal psychologist.
Oh, I can see it.
Yes.
I can see it.
But I changed my major 7 times.
As most college students do.
Right. So I ended up earning my bachelor's degree in English and communications, and I'm a certified secondary ed teacher, so middle school, high school teacher.
Okay.
So
you studied that, and so let's talk about some of the jobs you had before the Y, kind of what led you to that place. I know you said you were involved with Baker College. What did you do right out of college, and then kind of talk about the journey up to where you ended up today?
So right out of college, there weren't a lot of teaching jobs, number one. And I was raised by 2 high school teachers. And so I knew that if I found the right spot, I could have a lifelong job, but nothing felt right. I spent a lot of time as a substitute teacher in Livingston and Shiawassee counties, into Ingham County. And so I substitute taught a lot. And then I got a job teaching GED prep at night in Weberville. And I fell in love with adult students. And so almost immediately I started working on my master's degree at Michigan State in adult learning, and was in a class with somebody who worked at Baker College. She was 20 years older than me, and we sat on opposite sides of the room, but it was just the 2 of us who laughed at our professor's really goofy jokes. And so we started to sit together. And that person was Charlotte Hoschel.
Okay.
And so, she, again, an amazing community member who passed away recently. And she's the reason I got connected in 1994 to Baker College.
Okay.
And so prior to that, summer jobs, I had some interesting ones. My dad, as a teacher, often painted houses in the summertime, so I did that. But I was always bummed because I wasn't allowed to be up on the tall ladders. I was the daughter.
Yeah, you had to go paint that stuff down at the
so
bottom.
So I got to paint and scrape the bottom half of the house, which really wasn't as much fun.
Scraping is the worst.
Oh my gosh. Well, and in Escanaba, there are a lot of old wooden houses.
Yeah.
Kept us busy.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a summer job that was working for the Soil and Water Conservation District. I used to plant little tiny pine trees. That's what I did for one summer. But again, got to appreciate different types of work.
Yeah.
So that when I graduated from college in education, I knew I wanted to work with people, and I knew I wanted to influence people. But being a high school teacher just wasn't cutting it. So I found my way, through some of those other jobs.
I think that's an important thing for young people to understand. Like I always tell people, like, you have to work some jobs that you hate to get to the job that you love. It's very rare that right out of college you just get the career that you always dreamed about. It happens, but I think, we're living in such an instant gratification society, but it's hard for young people who grew up in a social media world where they see like this overnight success all the time, which is still very rare, but it seems like a lot to them because they see it on social media. And so young people lose that patience of the journey.
No, I agree.
I'm 40 years old and I'm still like grinding at this thing, trying to make it work and make it happen. But I feel young. I feel like, I have so much more time ahead of me. And I think kids are just like almost trained to judge themselves. And I blame most of it on social media. They judge where they're at in life. They judge their progress or lack of progress. And so they get this idea that, they go on social media and they see the highlight reel. Everybody posts their best day, their best purchase, their best job, their best relationship. You don't hear about all the bad days that they had, just like you. And so you scroll and you see your friends all having these great days and these great accomplishments and these new raises and promotions and new cars. And you think, man, I'm not doing it. And so I would encourage young people. I mean, if you talk to any entrepreneur that has had some success, there's a journey.
Absolutely.
We all work some crappy jobs that we didn't love, but it taught us things, and we learned, and it taught us about who we were as people, and it taught us about what we liked and what we didn't like, and we adapted, and it's all part of the journey. So be patient. You're early in the process. You have time. Just be patient and let it go. But I don't want to skip over something. You told me before the show that you used to be a DJ or a radio DJ
for a very short time, one semester.
Friday nights.
Yes.
Heavy metal with Laura?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. We can't skip over that one.
So one of the many times I changed my major, I was an advertising major. And so I was taking all sorts of different communications classes, and one of them involved, the teeny tiny radio station. It only aired on campus, so I probably had 3 listeners, right?
Just like our podcast.
Right, exactly. You know the experience.
I do, yeah.
And so I don't even remember how it started, but one of my classmates had a show that he did a couple mornings a week, which I think got more airtime or more people listening just because of the time of day. And he said, we have a slot. And I'm like, for what? I was young, naive, and thought, I can do this. And I got to pick whatever I wanted to play, and I got to do, back then it was hard to do research because, there
was no Google.
No. And so, I'd research these heavy metal bands, and I'd talk to people, who were living on campus who I knew a lot about Slayer, for instance, or whomever, and just trying to make a fun mix for the couple hours that I had a radio station or radio show. But I have to tell you, I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah.
As introverted as I am naturally, I love to be able to share things I know with people.
Yeah.
And so it pushed me out of my comfort zone, I guess. But it's not one of those things that most people, if they heard that, like when they see this or hear this podcast, they'll go, what?
Yeah, it was a surprise to me.
So I just think that, all the different majors I had, I learned different things about me. And one was from that short stint, I was an ad major for probably a year, but did that show for a semester.
Yeah.
And I just learned that, sometimes I have to push myself out of my comfort zone to do something. And I probably got extra credit for a class. Was that even still legal back then? I'm not sure, but it was a good experience.
Well, what was your favorite song to play on the show? Do you remember?
Well, I did wear out my Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction CD. So
That's a good
probably,
one.
I opened with Welcome to the Jungle
you can't go
every
wrong
Friday
there.
night.
You can't go wrong there.
And I was in like the 9 to 11 slot.
Yeah.
Well, everybody else is at
that opening riff is great. That's a great way to start a radio show. Well,
Absolutely.
my podcast starts with No Easy Way Out.
Right.
So I mean, I that's my genre,
Right.
my era. So yeah.
Well, and I think it was fun because people would come up to me. University of Detroit at the time was a pretty small campus. There's residence halls or dorms on campus, and this small row of fraternity houses, and it was very, very small. But most of us lived on campus, and we ate in the same cafeteria. It's not like a lot of campuses now where you have all these different options. You had 2 meal options.
Community unto itself, right?
And so I know it's different now, but back then, people would come up to me if they figured out who I was with suggestions. And so it was kind of...
That's cool.
It is.
Yeah.
And again, it was an interesting role to play in a small community like that for the little bit that I did it. So
I'm a Journey fan. And you kind of might be the muse for the song Don't Stop Believin', because you're a small town girl living in a lonely world. You met a city boy born and raised in South Detroit. I mean, you said you're a college sweetheart, right? Was he from Detroit?
No.
Man, it was all coming together there. I thought this was it.
No. Didn't inspire that song.
Well, Don't Stop Believin' either way. So
yes, agreed. Well, and it's funny too, because one of my ringtones, when my brother calls me, we commuted back and forth from Detroit to Escanaba. Not really commuted, but we'd go home together on the weekends.
That's a hike.
And when you come around US 2, as you get onto the bay, you can see the lights of Escanaba. And so Lights is the ringtone that I have anytime my big brother calls me. So Journey's definitely in my favorite wheelhouse.
And they're great. Well, so, for those listening, what are some things that you picked up along the way on your journey? Something, you've alluded to, you learned a lot about yourself. And what are some things that you could share with the audience some things that on this journey, and the journey's still going, right?
Sure, right.
It's not over yet. We're still on this thing. Well, what are some things you've learned along the way do you think that would be helpful to people that are on their journey?
Well, one of the big things I think is to find friends and work colleagues and get to know them who aren't like you.
Right.
It's so important to have other people share their ideas. And I think it's important to find different styles depending on your role. And how do you know what that's going to be if you're not talking to somebody who's different than you are?
Exactly.
And so I think surrounding yourself with people who have a common interest, perhaps. Maybe there's some overlap somewhere, but somebody who's not just like you.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's important, number one.
Yeah, I think 100%. We were talking a little bit about the show. I mean, number one, life is boring when you're around people that are just like you. Life is more interesting when you surround yourself with people who, think a little bit differently. And I think, in my experience, and I've lived in 3 or 4 different states. I've worked in different careers, and I've met a lot of people in my life. And I would say that the majority of us agree on a lot more than we disagree on.
I agree with you there.
And
yes.
So I think that if you have those conversations, number one, seek out those people that think a little differently, believe a little different. They're not your enemy necessarily. I mean, there are some people that maybe are the enemy, but I don't think that's the majority of people.
I would agree.
So seek those people out, get to know them, learn about them, ask them questions. Why do you think like that? Why did you do that way? Why do you believe like this? And you can learn so much. And when you can have a conversation to listen instead of to speak or to be right, but listen to learn and hear and empathize. Like, empathy is such a big thing with me, that to empathize with why people think. And man, you start to see that, these are just people. These are just people that, maybe they think a little different, but these are good people. And I think, again, that's what I love about this community. Is because there is such a diversity of thought and opinion and processes and methods, but we all seem to come together when we need to and make it work. And I think that's another thing that makes even America unique. So
no, I agree with you there. And I think for me, part of that is, as I've gotten older, I've realized I like to surround myself with people from different generations, because change seems to happen more quickly now. And I want to know somebody who's 20 years older than me. I want to know why they think the way they think. And at the same time, not that I consider myself old, but I'm 12 years older than you, and I want to surround myself with people who are young enough that they can help me. Well, besides with technology, I'm not a digital native. That can help me understand what the next generation or the next 2 generations, why they feel the way they feel or why they think the way they think. And I believe it allows me to be more effective in any role that I'm 100%. In, whether it's parenting, our 20-something daughters, or my role as CEO at the Y. I think it just allows me to be more effective if I understand what the 20-somethings think versus the 30-somethings versus our, 75-year-old active older adults.
Yes. And then I think to the person hearing that, it's also important that you understand what season of life you're in.
Correct.
Because, when you're in your 20s, that's a different season than someone like me who's in my 40s and has 6 kids and trying to run a business and even thinking about the future and maybe retirement down the road. Like, you're not thinking about that stuff at 20. So that season of life, don't compare yourself to me. Learn from me. And I want to learn from people that have come before me and even learn from people that are coming after me. But to compare yourself to those people who are in different seasons is not wise. It's learn, observe, get knowledge, get information, and understand where you're at in the journey and how you're going to get there. And I always tell young people it's important. I just took my son this past weekend. He's a senior in high school. And so I took him. I have 3 weekends this year during his senior year planned. It's just me and him going away, doing some fun stuff, cool. And just having some, man-to-man conversations. He's a great kid, good head on his shoulders, but talking to him about getting a vision for his life, And, to expect a 17-year-old kid to know what they want to do for the rest of their life is unrealistic.
Absolutely.
I think especially today. I think as a society, we expect less and less of kids. Like, people are getting older and older when they have real expectations on them. And so, I said, I'm not telling you to think about what you're going to be doing when you're my age, but what's a vision that you have for where do you see your life going? What's important to you? What are you most happy when you're doing this? And thinking about those things. And I think if young people could just get a vision for their life, I think they're looking for the playbook. Well, I graduate high school, I go to college, I get a degree, and then I get a job. And that's not the same for everybody.
No.
And so you have to understand what you're good at, what makes you happy, what are your talents, what are you passionate about. And man, the world we live in today, you can make money doing just about anything with the internet. I mean, you could be the world's foremost authority on camera lights, and you could have a YouTube channel about camera lights, and you could make money doing it if you were really passionate about it. So trying to get him to understand that, get a vision for what you want to do. Don't look at what here's what the box says and check it off, but what do you want to do? And I think it's important that anybody, whatever phase of life, have a vision for your life. What does the next few years look like? And then when you know what you're working towards, it makes those daily decisions more impactful.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, I could do this or I could not do that. Does this fit into where I'm going? And it helps you with those daily decisions so you don't necessarily waste those time, because time passes fast.
It does. And, I think it's not healthy to have kids think that they need to be comparing themselves to anybody.
100%.
I mean, we're all unique. And so I think if I could tell my 20-something-year-old self, don't compare, but instead, what do you see in that other person that you want to emulate, that you want to copy, that you admire? And collect those things
100%.
To build the path that you want to take. And, that path will have twists and turns, but if you know yourself well enough and I don't think my strengths today are any different than the strengths I had when I was involved in, leading this club in high school or captain of this in high school. Right. I think that, I've been fortunate enough that I guess because I'm a deep thinker, that I am aware of what I need help with, but also what I have to offer. And I knew at a I think younger age than a lot of my college friends that I knew I was meant to work with people, and I knew that I knew the type of impact I could have. But I know what I struggled with in comparing myself to all these other young professional women. And when, the aha moment for me as I was working on my master's, working part-time at night, and I actually sold rings on campus at Michigan State University, like class rings. And I met so many unique people doing that job. It was one of my only stints in retail. And I remember having an aha moment one night riding home from campus that, what does it matter where I am in my journey compared to some of my college friends who at 23, 24 were landing pretty lucrative jobs.
Right.
And that I needed to find my own way through, and that I needed to stop comparing myself to other people. And at that, it was a conscious decision. And I still struggle. We all do. It's one of the reasons why, I like those shoes. And we notice things about other people, but I've learned that I need to take things on and try them on. And if it fits for me, great. But I like, if somebody has a certain attribute that I like, I want to go ahead and give it a go. And sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. But we can't compare ourselves. We're all unique. So.
No, and you hit on something that I think is important, and I want to touch on it because you talked about you have a good understanding of what you're good at, but also a good understanding of what you struggle with. And people have often asked me, what is the most important quality of a leader? And I always say, hands down, the most important thing a leader can possess is self-awareness. Is that you can be just as confident to talk about your weaknesses as you are about your strengths. You do not have to be the jack of all trades. You do not have to be great at everything.
Right.
It's better to be great at a few things than to be good at a bunch of little things. And so understanding if you're going to lead an organization or lead a group or lead a family or whatever you're going to lead, then you have to have a good understanding of yourself. And when you have self-awareness, that actually helps with self-esteem.
Absolutely.
That helps with self-assurance, understanding like, okay, I'm not good at this, but that's okay because I'm good at these other things. And you don't have to mask, you don't have to mask that you have insufficiencies because we all have them, but you become just kind of very comfortable in your own skin because you realize I have some gifts and I'm going to maximize those gifts. And then I'm going to either hire my weaknesses or surround myself with people who can help me with those weaknesses. Right. And it's all okay. It's all good. And I think that, man, it's just, I blame social media. We're living in a social media world here at AZ, especially because we work a lot in it.
I bet.
But, so many people now judge themselves based on likes, follows, shares. If they put something out there and people aren't liking it, they think it's not significant. And it's just, I think it's very unhealthy. But so many young people I talk to, they find significance in that persona that they have online is everything to them. And I know Instagram now is making it where people can't see how many likes were on a post, which I think is a good step in the right direction because you can see it yourself, but your friends can't see it because it just creates this unhealthy jealousy or envy. And there's studies showing it's leading to kids being depressed and feeling.
Sure.
So understand who you are. Take a good long look in the mirror. Understand, be confident about your strengths. Understand your weaknesses. It doesn't mean you disregard the weaknesses and don't try to improve them, but they're there and it's okay.
Well, and I think people are hesitant to ask somebody else about themselves.
Yeah.
I feel very comfortable asking, my husband or work colleagues or friends, how do you see me from this perspective?
Right.
Or, when we were working on this project, what could I have done differently? Or just asking for that input. And not necessarily on the things that we're doing, but really on me.
Yep.
And I think that our society, shame on us that kids don't recognize when somebody tells you something about you, about how amazing you are, you just kind of blow it off. But then when we say, oh, well, you really should, that's what they take to heart.
That's all they hear. Yeah.
And it makes me sad that so many youth don't see the potential they have in themselves.
Yeah, I tell my staff here all the time, because we get, we have artists here, graphic artists, web designers, all of it's art in some way. And if you're an artist, if you've created something, the number one thing you're excited to do is to show it to people.
Sure.
But then when you're showing it to clients who paid you to do it, like it wasn't a passion project. I didn't paint this picture because I wanted to. I painted it because someone paid me to paint it. So it has to be what they want, not what I want. So you show someone this logo you designed for them and you're excited about it and they hate it and they criticize it. And young people, it's not just young people, it's anybody,
right,
has a hard time hearing that critique, like, ugh. And then it gets to the point where like, well, you're wrong. I think it's good. And we get like that in our business. So I've tried to train my staff to crave critiquing. It will sharpen you. It'll make you better. Just last weekend, I went out to lunch. There's a 78-year-old man who's been in my life for a while, who goes to my church, and I asked him if I could go to breakfast. And I just asked him. I said, Doc, that's what I call him. I said, Doc, you've been observing me for the last year. We haven't had time together. Tell me what I need to work on. He's just a wise old guy, and I appreciate his perspective, and I wanted to open myself up to his critiquing. And whether I agree with everything he says or not, I want to hear what his perspective is. What do you think about what I'm doing? And taking that and hearing it and trying to get better. Like, I think you get much better from the critiques in your life than you do from the compliments in your life.
Absolutely.
But those compliments are important too. It's important to understand what those things are and what they mean. So
well, and if youth could recognize, if the kids could recognize, kids 25, 30, I mean, I don't know for me right now where that cutoff would be,
That's
but
a kid, yeah.
People need to realize that it doesn't say anything about your own self-worth because you hit a bump.
Right.
We all hit bumps.
Big ones.
And I think that I know I need to, as a supervisor, as a mentor, do a better job of saying, okay, but you picked yourself back up. What did you learn?
Right.
Okay, let it go. And so just helping people recognize that there are bumps and sometimes we take detours around things.
Yep.
And that's just part of the process.
Yeah, there's a meme that I like that it shows what people think success is, and it's got a starting line and a straight line and a finish line. And it says what real success is, and as a starting line, and it has this like crazy circular up and down road.
That's exactly what it is. So, yeah, absolutely.
And you're always on the journey, so keep pushing. I think it's key that you define what success is to you. It's different for everybody.
It is.
For some of you, it might be wealth. For some of you, it might be success. For some of you, it might be fame. For some of you, it just might be independence, free time, whatever. You get to define success for yourself. So start there. What is success to me? And then you're going to know what you're pushing. That'll help you get that vision. So yeah, great advice. Thank you for sharing that stuff with us. I mean, that's really, really invaluable. And I hope you listening would take that to heart. I mean, here are two people that are just in the journey, on the journey, and we're trying to always get better at it, and we're learning along the way. But I want to transition right now to one of my favorite segments of our show. I just sent you a text message. It's called Explain That Post, and I did a deep dive on your social media. So it's like you have very few incriminating photos on your social media, but I found this one from a while ago, and I just think this one needs, and when I heard about Friday night's heavy metal with Laura made a little more sense, but I think this post, and our audience can see this, needs just a little more context. What do we got going on here?
So I think the show at the Lebowski Center was Rock of Ages.
That's a great show, by the way. And the movie was good, too.
I mean, I hope I have the name of it right.
Yeah, Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so a group of friends and I made arrangements to go, but we agreed we were going to all dress like rock stars. And so I'm in my Guns N' Roses shirt, and, you know, it's in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So although I don't have the 80s haircut anymore, I tried to 80s out my hair
poof a little bit, yeah.
You know, get the cool mirrored sunglasses. And so that was a selfie.
Lipstick.
Yep. That was a selfie I took before we went to the show.
You even got the studded choker going on there. I mean, you really did it out. I'd like to see the whole ensemble.
A child of the 80s. Oh, I had the acid washed jeans and the black Converse high tops.
Yeah,
so.
It looked like a fun night. That was a tough one. I had to look through pictures for like 30 minutes to find something that was worth, you know, showing our audience. But well, thanks for explaining that post to us. I just needed a little more context, so it looks like you had a fun.
It was fun.
So I always end our show, since 2020 we've started ending our show this way. We talk a little bit about the pandemic because it's such a topic that has affected all of us. It's such a thing that's happening that's affected everybody, and particularly if you're in business and you're running a business or running an organization, there have been some things that have happened that have caused all of us to have to pivot in some way or another. So the question I have, first of all, is at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was a determination of what businesses were essential and which ones were not, was the Y on the list of essential businesses?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
We were not.
So you guys had to shut down, and I do remember that. So what kind of reaction did you get from your membership base? Were people okay with it? Were people frustrated? Was it a mixture of both? Or what kind of reaction did you get to that?
Well, there really, I think, probably three main reactions. One was, really no reaction at all. We're trying to figure it out, and people kind of just stuck with us because they didn't know what else to do.
At the beginning, none of us knew what to think, right?
Exactly. Is this a 3-week thing? Is this nobody knew.
Nobody would have thought it would be 18 months.
No.
Right.
And so a couple months into it, we did have members reach out and say, I want you to know, even though I'm not using my membership, I want you to still, keep my membership active. I want to pay every month because I know with your doors closed, we still want to support you.
Yeah.
And then, realistically, we had some members. And again, you know how the job world went then. Some people weren't working. Things were changing. Because of the financial commitment, we're going to stop our membership now, and we hope to come back when you reopen.
Yeah.
And so members, for the most part, were very understanding.
Mm-hmm. That's a challenge. I think everybody was kind of dealing with that. And again, I think at the beginning, nobody really knew how to react or what they should respond. And so I think to everybody, 2 weeks to slow the spread was a very reasonable and understandable. And then as it got more, 2 more weeks and then 4 more weeks, and I'm sure it made things increasingly challenging. And I know gyms in particular were one of the last to get to reopen. And you guys are categorized as a gym, I'm assuming, even though you have other things for the community.
Right.
So I know the answer to this, but I want you to talk about it. What was something creative or innovative you did in response to what was happening in the world, to not allow to be open, but wanting to keep engaged with your members, keep engaged with the community? What are some things that the Y did to stay active?
Well, one of the things we had staff who felt very strongly that we needed to continue to reach out to our active older adult members who we knew were probably pretty isolated.
Yeah.
And so for months and months, phone calls, text messages, that sort of thing. And so that really was just to our members. But right away, we stepped into the feeding arena, Tony. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's right in the middle of our mission.
Yeah.
Our mission's 3-part: healthy living, youth development, and social responsibility. Well, what's more socially responsible than making sure people have food on their table?
Yeah.
And so we stepped into that as a partner with Owasso Public Schools when they couldn't have people coming into their buildings. Mm-hmm. And so from that, we started having mobile food pantries. And literally in one afternoon, we fed 250 households. And it was a humbling and inspiring experience.
Yeah.
And so that really was the biggest pivot for us, moving away from more traditional programming to jumping into an arena that we, at least, in recent years, the Shiawassee Family YMCA has not participated in a feeding program like that.
Yeah, and I know several people that took advantage of that, and it was such a big thing, and you guys are still doing some
Correct.
things. And so what an amazing response and what an amazing help to the community. And, you could sit there and feel like, well, this isn't fair and woe is me. And I think even there's probably moments where all of us felt like this isn't fair.
Oh, sure.
But to respond with a way is, instead of just feeling sorry for me and my organization, I'm going to find a way to give back and help people through this. And we tried to be as creative as possible to think, what are some nice things we can do for our community during this time? And I think we saw that all around Owasso and probably other places, but people just wanted to be part of the solution instead of, perpetuating the problem. Whether we agreed how the things were happening, we just kind of came together and work together. So when were you allowed to initially, so that kind of the first orders were middle of March.
Right.
When were you allowed to initially kind of reopen even with some restrictions? And
well,
then
we
what
were
were
able
those
to,
restrictions?
We were able to run summer camp in the summer of 2020. We had, many fewer kids than we typically do. But we weren't able to reopen our doors in terms of our fitness center until September of 2020. So we were closed for 180 some days.
Yeah, that's a long time.
And so when people came back, obviously cleaning protocols had changed. We as a fitness center, as a gym, cleaning's always been a way of life.
Always, yeah. You always clean up after yourself.
Right. And so...
And you get the dirty looks if you don't.
Right. Well, that's part of being a community,
Exactly.
right? Is everybody holds each other accountable.
Right.
And so cleaning protocols were really just over the top because they had to be. At that time, everybody had to be masked still, which was a challenge because some people just are not comfortable doing a spin class, a cycle class with a mask on, and it is hard. But and so that was part of the challenge. Social distancing and room capacities. We've got a couple different weight rooms, and the maximum number I think in each was 7 or 8 people. And again, our fitness center is large square foot wise compared to the size of our membership. So there were only a couple times that really became an issue, but that was something that we all had to learn to deal with. And then the wellness checks that we did. You walk in and you have to get your temperature taken, and you have to answer the COVID questions that everybody's really familiar with. Have you been exposed or whatever? And so, my number one goal when we reopened was just to make sure our staff were safe. And then from that, then the protocols that were in place. But, I was fortunate because we have a really strong group of YMCA leaders here in the state of Michigan. We met via Zoom weekly. And so we were doing the same things. We were figuring out the same things, sharing ideas. We attended webinars from the CDC. YUSA was helpful, our mothership. And so I think it was comforting for me and made my world a lot easier that I didn't have to figure out all of this alone from a YMCA perspective.
Yeah.
But, the nonprofit group that we have through that nonprofit capacity building group that the cooks support, we met just as regularly. How are you? And a lot of times, Tony, the conversation wasn't about our business, was about how are you dealing with things.
Yeah.
Yes. And so having that helped. But it wasn't that different of a world when we reopened. We had the barriers, whether it was a mask or, the big plexiglass barrier that's around our front desk. But, now the recommendation is if people aren't fully vaccinated that they mask. But that's really up to individuals.
Sure. Well, and I think, you spoke on something, it was cool for me to see the creative things that business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders did to just stay serving their communities, to stay serving their customers. And, one of the things I advocated for, I actually was involved with a few other business owners, and we wrote to Ben Frederick, our state rep, and just said, and this was probably middle of the summer when really at that time, I think it was really just like gyms and restaurants that weren't allowed to be open. And so we were kind of advocating. We have several clients that are restaurant owners and even some gym owners. And so we advocated and just said, at this point, I think we all understand the risk. These business owners are smart and they're responsible. So give us the data. let us know what the protocols are, but let us open and do it safely. We can know how to do this safely. We can do it. And so give us a little more trust that we're not going to just be, and I know that sometimes people are irresponsible, and so that was kind of what I was advocating for, because, you know, the gyms and the restaurants were having a really tough time last midsummer. And especially those ones that were like independently owned and didn't have any kind of funding coming in, and trying to keep their employees engaged. And so, but yeah, so that was the challenge, but it was so cool to see all the unique and creative ways that people came up with to make their products available, whether it be online or just to do the different things. It was really neat to see everybody come together. So
it was.
So today, I mean, are you seeing people, are you carrying the same level of membership? Are people coming back? Are there still hesitancies of people to come and be in public like that?
There are still hesitancies, I think. You know, we're fortunate for our YMCA that we're about 90% where we were in March of 2020. I just attended a virtual YUSA conference a couple weeks ago, and through the networking and conversations, some Ys are at 65, 70%.
Wow.
So I feel fortunate that our membership is almost back to where it was.
Yeah.
It's not all the same people, but our membership is fluid that way, you know, from year to year. And so I feel very fortunate that we have had as many people who have come back or who have joined since we reopened last September. You know, our program numbers are good. Mm-hmm. You know, we've got a lot of kids playing soccer right now. Yeah. And, you know, if you would have told me a year ago that that's where we were going to be, well, it's certainly not what we budgeted for. You know, we're well beyond budget. But it's nice to see people coming back to the community that is the YMCA.
I love seeing people out. You know, I think our community is bold. Some might say reckless a little bit, but I think we're bold, because I would go and visit other communities during the height of the pandemic, and it was like some places were like a ghost town.
I agree with you.
You drive through a wild, so it was like almost like, unless you went in somewhere, you didn't even feel like there was a pandemic. You saw still people out and about, people walking, and so, you know, I'm glad to hear that people are taking advantage of coming back. So what is some good advice that you would give to other business owners and leaders in our community that are still continuing to navigate the pandemic, and as new, you know, restrictions, or most things are coming now in form of suggestions, not restrictions, or recommendations. Thank you. And so, but there's still a lot to navigate, because you're not just trying to navigate what's the right and moral thing, but also what do my members and customers want, and what people are going to actually tolerate. And so there's like kind of this thing that we're all trying to navigate. What's some good advice you'd give to people as they're trying to navigate that?
Well, there's a couple pieces of advice I think I can share. One is remember why you do what you do. You know, remember what your mission is, or remember what your goals are. Mm-hmm. And when you can keep that big picture in mind, that's where the creativity comes in, and you can find a way to still help your business or to get there. And I think that it's important to communicate. We have a lot of resources in this community. You know, I was on the SEDB phone call every week, watching to see what resources the chamber was sharing. I can't tell you the number of times that I talked to Cheryl Peterson about this type of financing or that type of financing. But I also talked to other nonprofit leaders, where nobody is in this pandemic alone. And if you think you can do it alone, you're wrong.
Right.
Well, or you're going to be so stressed that you're not going to be able to keep things balanced.
For sure.
And I think that it's important to recognize that. Take advantage of the resources that are available to you. And I was thrilled to watch how many grants were given to this community, because it was something that...
It was a boost.
It was. And economically, we all needed that. But again, take advantage of it. Partner with people. Find different ways to do things. You don't have to continue continuing on the way that you have been, because it might not work anymore.
Right.
But for me, part of what helped us navigate through was knowing we weren't in it alone, but just talking to other people.
And this is, again, going back to our earlier conversation about collaborating, getting to know other people, putting yourself out there, co-opetition. When you find yourself in a situation like that where you just don't know what to do, you have people that you can reach out to that can help you, because being an island to yourself is never easy.
Right.
And so putting yourself in a position where you have other people to gain information and ask ideas and even support you emotionally through these types of things, I think is always important.
I agree.
Okay, so we are going to conclude today's episode with, I think, our audience favorite segment called Say It in 60.
Okay.
So we are going to put 60 seconds on the clock. Our guys over here are going to get a timer for us. And I'm going to ask you 10 rapid fire questions in 60 seconds. So there's no wrong answer because they're your answers. Okay. But this is just how we're going to glean a little bit, we're going to squeeze a little more Laura Archer knowledge out of the day here. And if you say them all in 60 seconds, you get to go home with that mug that you're drinking out of today. And even if you don't, we're still going to let you go home with the mug. But it makes it feel like there's a prize, right? So, okay, Deanna, are we ready with the timer? All right. What is a must-read book?
Pride and Prejudice.
What is a daily habit that everyone should do?
Meditate or pray or somehow still your head.
What is your favorite podcast?
I listen to a lot of NPR or anything by youth.
What is a must-binge TV series?
Oh, Schitt's Creek.
What is your why?
To have an impact in this world, one person at a time.
What is your best piece of advice?
If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Love that one. What is your favorite quote?
To thine own self be true, from Shakespeare and Hamlet.
Very good. Who do you look up to?
Besides my 6'4" husband, individuals I think who have had insurmountable struggles and find a way to start again.
All right, how much time we got left? 10 seconds. What is success to you?
Being happy and living a balanced life.
Very, very good. She did it with probably 5 seconds to spare, 6 seconds to spare. Congratulations, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and we appreciate that. And again, thank you so much for being our guest
I'm
today.
so glad that this worked out. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I knew we wouldn't have, we always said we were joking. We'll not struggle with things to talk about,
no,
for sure.
not at all.
Well, before we go, why don't you look into this camera and tell our audience members how they can find you, find the why,
Sure.
how they can take advantage of the programs you have to offer and all that good information.
So you're welcome to stop by the Y at 515 West Main Street here in Owasso anytime. You can check us out online at www.shiawasseeymca.org or give us a call at 725-8136.
All right, so check them out. We've been a long time involved with the Y ourselves. It's a great place to be. Your kids will love it. Your family will love it. And you'll probably be in a little bit better shape. So, all right. Well, if you've stuck around with us, we appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. As my mother always says, you can't and never could until you tried. So go out there and try something great, my friends, and don't take the easy way out. We'll see you next time.